Hi friends! So in this video we're going to be doing the Afterthought heel of a sock. Again, this is the head, shoulders, heels, and toes pattern that I'm writing. It will be available this summer. When it is available, you'll see a link for that in the description box. But this is a video to show you how to do the Afterthought heel for this sock. So a true Afterthought heel is actually going to utilize where you're just knitting a tube, and from cuff to toe you're going to finish the toe, and then after you finish all of this you'll just have a tube. Then you're going to cut in your heel on the other side. In the pattern that I've written for you, I am showing you where to put stitch markers to mark where that Afterthought heel is going to happen. Another type of heel you may have seen as is actually an intentional heel. So that's where you put in some scrap yarn so you're not cutting. But this is going to utilize cutting one leg of one stitch and unraveling in either direction to create this fun heel. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I tried a couple of things to help minimize any holes that occur, so I don't really have any holes that occur at the corners of the heel to the foot. And I also, I think it's a great way to accommodate that if you have that higher instep, so from the tip of your heel to the top of your foot is a lot longer. You can actually accommodate a little bit more for that with the Afterthought heel. So let's do this together so it's not that scary, and see what we think about the Afterthought heel. So I have here a finished tube sock. I have the cuff, I have the toe, and I have it marked where I am going to cut in my Afterthought heel. This is a folded cuff. This is the sample for my pattern head, shoulders, heels, and toes, again coming out at the end of the summer. But in the pattern, I do tell you about how to place these markers, and these markers are set for cutting our Afterthought heel. You may also be wondering what all these markers are along my sock. What I do is every 10 rounds I put a stitch marker, and that makes it easier for me to count. This way I know how many rounds I did for both socks, how many rounds I did before marking for my Afterthought heel, so I can recreate that in another sock. So in this one I've already completed that task. I can even kind of double check my marker here for cutting in the heel is right at where I'm going to cut that heel. So you can eyeball it like this, you can measure it, but I like to use the stitch markers again every 10 rounds so I don't have to try to count every single one of these stitches. So my pattern tells you where to place these stitch markers. And so this is the back side of the sock. So in the pattern, it's going to tell you first thing you're going to do is knit across the front of your sock. Then you're going to place the stitch marker for that first stitch on the back side of your sock, one stitch for the middle of that round, and one stitch for the end of the round. And so we're going to be using these two outside markers. We're going to be picking up stitches above and below them, and the inside marker is supposed to help us stay on track because sometimes we like to travel, and this is going to make sure that we are in the right spot. So if we again kind of orient ourselves, this is a little bit closer so you can see a little easier that these stitch markers I've put through the V's. And if you can appreciate, again on a V, there's two parts. There's a left part and there's a right part of the V. So we're actually going to be picking up the right leg of all the V's in a row above these stitch markers. So on this row up here, and all the stitches on the row below. So we're going to be picking up all those stitches and having them on our needle so that when we cut and unravel, the stitches are going to be already on the needle. They're not going to fall off. Okay. So in the pattern, I tell you to start at the end of the round. Okay, so this one is technically the end of the round. All right, the one on your left side if you have your heel looking at you. If you start on the other side, it's not a big deal. But essentially what I'm having you do is we have, let me fold it this way. We have our stitch marker here for the end of the round, and it's going to be the red one. And this red one is marking this stitch right here. I am going to be picking up the stitches in the row above it. Okay, so this stitch here. But I'm also going to start one stitch over to the left. So I'm actually going to be picking up one extra stitch on either side. That makes the heel a little bit wider and gives you a little bit more room, especially to keep those holes from happening at the corner. Okay, so we're going to be coming in these stitches in this direction. We're going to find, again, here's our V from our stitch marker. Here's one stitch above it, and then I'm going over one stitch to the left, and that's the stitch I'm going to start with. Okay, so I'm going to stick my needle into the right leg of that stitch and continue across. So I've just got this laying flat on the board, but what I actually like to do, let me get myself set up here, is I'm going to stick my hand in the sock and give myself a little bit more control over the fabric. And you just take your time picking up each stitch, picking up the right leg of each stitch. And again, as I go across this row, and as you go across your row of your sock, you're going to appreciate how easily you can start to travel up or down a row. So again, that middle stitch for me, that blue stitch marker, is just helping me, when I get to it, I should be above it. So that tells me that I stayed on track, because it is a little annoying to go across and pick up all these stitches and get to the other stitch marker and realize that you traveled and now you have to take all of them out. So in this case, I would have only gone halfway. And just to show you here, I'm at the blue marker, and you can see that I am still on track. I am picking up the right leg of the stitch right above the stitch that my blue marker has marked. And here I am. Here's the red stitch marker. That's the stitch marked right above it, right there. I'm going to pick up that leg, so that means I'm on track. And then in my instructions, I have you pick up one more past that stitch above the stitch marker. So here's what we have, and I'm going to pull my needle so those right legs all end up on the cord. So just to orient you a little bit, again, I came in from this direction. This was the end of the round. I picked up all the stitches across, and now my needle has come out here on really what's the middle of the sock. So I am now going to bring this needle out. I'll show you. I'm going to bring this needle out just so I have some room to come back, and I'm going to loop around. And now I'm going to pick up in the other direction. I'm going to pick up the stitches underneath the row that I marked with my stitch markers. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so here we are. I have this right leg. This is the right leg of the stitch in the same row as my red stitch marker. And now I'm going to go one more row below that, okay? So again, I'm going to be picking up the right leg. So I'm just going to make my way across here, one stitch at a time. You do want to leave those stitch markers in for now. And what I want you to appreciate is that there is a row of stitches in between. So I have my right legs on the row above on my cable, and I'm picking up the right legs on the row below, and in between you can see those little V's. So there is a row of stitches still in between, and that's actually the row that we're going to be unraveling. Okay. Okay, and I'm coming up to my blue stitch marker that is telling me this is the center of the row I'm picking up. And here you can see I'm about to go into the stitch below it. So I have managed to not travel up or down while picking up these stitches. Let's keep going. We're doing a solid color here, so it's a little bit more difficult as far as staying on that round. If you are doing stripes, especially like self-striping, it's really easy to pick a color where you're going to be picking up your stitches, and those colored stripes really make a big difference. So I think that's why a lot of people will end up doing an afterthought heel and self-striping. So if you're having a lot of trouble with this, consider doing self-striping yarn next time. And then we're almost to the end here. So let's see. I am picking up this one. And I know those stitch markers could be annoying. I'm picking up this stitch, the right leg of this stitch. Again, it's right below that red stitch marker. And then I'm going to do one more beyond that because I'm picking up an extra one. And now that I have picked up all those stitches on my needle, I'm just going to pull so that everybody is on the cord. That just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so this is what we're looking like. Everything is with around that center round that I marked. I've got both of my needles coming out really from where I started. Okay, the really scary, really fun part is cutting. So a couple of things that are going to help with this. First of all, some really nice sharp scissors. These tiny little scissors are really going to make a big difference. And then a darning needle or a tapestry needle. My favorite are the ones with the bent hook, and this one has a little bit of a point on it, so that's going to make this a little bit easier as well. Now this really, really scary part, all that's really happening is we're cutting one leg of one stitch. That's all we're cutting. This isn't steeking. We're not cutting a whole bunch. It's just one little leg. So you've got two legs on this stitch marker, and if it makes you feel better, you can just put your stitch marker so it's holding just one of those legs, like so. And then you can really pull on that stitch and see you have this nice big loop, relatively so compared to the others. That's all we're cutting. So you have this nice big loop. You're going to take your really sharp scissors, go into just that loop, and that's what you're cutting. Now we are unraveling, and we are going to unravel in either direction. So we're going to unravel all the way over to this stitch marker, and then we're going to unravel up to this stitch marker. So again, we picked up an extra one on either side so we can have a couple of stitches to help with holes and make this a little bit wider. So I'm going to go up to the stitch marker. So I'm going to be unraveling, and I'll show you the stitch right before the stitch marker. So we're just going to get our darning needle in there and grab those legs of those stitches, and this is in that center row, that row that we did not pick up, the row that those stitch markers were marking. And I'm just sticking my needle in the V, hopefully, and pulling it out. And so it doesn't want to unravel actually on its own. It needs you to pull that stitch through. So it can be a little bit difficult. But if you notice, as I'm unraveling these center V's, those right legs that we picked up are all on our cables. They're all safe and secure. Nothing bad is going to happen. Okay, so here you can see I've unraveled. I have the stitch on my stitch marker still, and I have one more stitch. So that is up to the stitch marker. So I'm going to unravel that one. And so then I'm going to leave these two stitches still intact. Okay? You're going to have this long tail. We're just going to stuff that in the sock for now, and later we'll weave in those ends. And now we're going to unravel in the other direction. So find that center spot and start grabbing some yarn with your tapestry needle or your darning needle and start pulling. Okay, and we've made it to the other side, and I'm going to unravel again up to that stitch marker. So here is the stitch on my stitch marker, and I've got one more in here to unravel. And again, we're going to leave, you'll notice we still have two right legs on the cables that correspond to two stitches in between that we are going to keep wound, keep on the cables. We're not going to unravel. So now what we have is this fun opening in our sock, a big old hole in our sock, just on one side where the heel is going to go. So you're going to grab your contrast color, and we're just going to start knitting. So I am going to, and we're doing our magic loop here. You can then take out the stitch markers now. They're going to kind of be annoying. And again, those stitches that we didn't unravel are going to stay there on either side. So we're going to go ahead and just start knitting. We're going to add in our new color, our contrast color, and we're going to knit a whole round. So I've gotten to the last 2 stitches of this half of the round. And using our magic loop, we're going to switch to the other side. And again, you'll notice those 2 stitches kind of hanging in there that we didn't unravel. They're going to stay there. We're just going to leave them there. And let's keep going. Okay, and again, I'm to the end of the round, knitting those last 2 stitches in the round. Okay. And again, those 2 stitches that we didn't unravel are in there. But what's real nice is that's going to help close up the corner where we have a little, those stitches are a little bit of extra fabric in there, so we don't get those holes on those corners. So at this point, you're just going to follow the instructions or your preferences. We knit 1 round. I usually like to knit 2 rounds, but if you actually knit more rounds, you're going to make the heel a little bit deeper and might accommodate a little bit for that higher instep. So really, that's up to you. Then what you're doing really is the decrease round, which is going to be the same as decreasing for your toe. So you can see how these 2 ends look. They look the same. So it's going to be the same setup as you did for your toe. After that, you're just going to be weaving in those ends. If you're getting any holes or gapping, perfect time to use those ends to weave them in to get everything closed up. But that is how that we do an Afterthought heel. Really not that scary, really kind of fun. And I hope that you give it a try.